So yes, thank you all for participating today in the CEU presentation. This presentation is called Tile and Stone Installation Materials and Methods. It is Laticrete's AIA 03 representation. Again, I am Curtis Underhill. I can get my phone number and my email to anyone after the training if that is needed. We'll press forward with the presentation itself. Again, tile and stone installation materials and methods. Laticrete is a registered provider with the AIA Continuing Education Systems, and today's learning unit will be on, or will be 1 credit towards the health, safety, and welfare. The learning objectives of today are going to be why we use ceramic tile and stone, what are the benefits of using the tile and stone, how can the right tile or stone be specified, and how can the right installation materials be specified. So ceramic tile and stone, whenever you're dealing with ceramic tile, the sky's the limit when it comes to design. Tile and stone offer maximum choice in color, texture, pattern, size, and finish. The advent of the water jet and the laser cutting allows for unbelievably intricate layouts for integration of various types of styles and finishes. Tile is easy to clean and maintain without harsh chemicals or cleaners. Properly installed tile offers lasting installations that are low cost over the lifetime of the project. So tile, as far as it going green with the LEED certifications, tile installation materials can be non-allergenic, low VOC, and tile is all natural. So ceramic tile, including porcelain, is made from natural products such as clay and other mineral products. Some of the brands of tile have a high level of recycled content. Some can even be up to 100% recycled content. Most tile installation materials are also made from all natural products like sand, Portland cement, limestone, and they're well below the acceptable VOC limits and do not harbor any allergens, which is really technical for right now, what we're going through in the world. LEED certification and compliance helps to make sure that construction is environmentally and occupant friendly. Tile is a great choice for LEED compliance. The projects that use tile generally earn credits for low VOC products. Using low VOC installation materials can also earn them credits as well. For example, like 1 credit can be used for using low VOC installation materials. 1 credit can be earned if the project is within 500 miles of an installation manufacturer's facility. So dealing with products that are actually made here inside the United States can really help you there as far as the 500-mile radius goes. 1 credit can also be earned if the raw material suppliers are within 500 miles of the manufacturing facilities, which they are in all cases, at least for us. So you can receive at least 2 credits by using our products, and possibly 3 if the project is within 500 miles of our facilities. So the 5 keys to installation: attending trainings, the substrate preparation, using the right tools, using your resources, and using trial and error. So again, any tile installation is only as good as the installation materials and methods that it's used for. Certified training programs, for example. The knowledge of the architect, the distributor, the installer, and even the end user is very important for long-term success of any installation. Careful specification is where a successful installation starts. So selecting the right methods. So the tile industry is very unique, and I'm lucky to be a part of it. We have so many organizations that are actually, some of them are free to use. Some of them, they have their memberships that are involved with that, but we have many reference standards that talk about the actual products themselves that we use in the installation, as well as the material that is used for the tile and the natural stone. The Tcna Handbook is one of the first things we'll call out. It's for ceramic tile installation. It's information on industry guidelines and specific installation types. Then we have the American National Standards Institute, which is ANSI for short. It's information on installation and testing methods, product performance requirements. What else? It's got it also establishes the minimum requirements for product performance too. So these are the standards that we're looking for in the specifications that actually call out where's the product being used, what are we using it for, Does this installation, like for example, is it a wet area, and does it need to have a ANSI specification for the type of materials that we use, such as waterproofing, for example? The Marble Institute of America, the MIA, that is the information on natural stone and their needs for installation methods. And then when it comes down to it, you actually have the manufacturer's recommendations, which is again for the tile or for the setting materials. For example, the manufacturer of the tile installation materials provides product information, installation instructions. Maybe they need a specific type of thin set that's going to be used to set their glass, for example. They will also offer things like material safety and data sheets, also known as the MSDS sheets as well. Again, manufacturer recommendations from the installation material side can also specify if we're going to what I'll call trump any standards that we say, hey, we are going to warranty this product even outside of its traditional standards that may be set by the TCNA. So always going to the manufacturing recommendations is going to be a big deal when we're talking about the tile installation. The most important considerations, like for example, what is the substrate going to be? Is it a wood or a concrete substrate? What is the type of tile or stone that's desired? Whether that's from the ownership or maybe, you know, we've worked with other companies before that in their areas of office areas or their lobby areas, maybe they want like a slip resistant tile, for example. That's something that they're going to need from an ownership standpoint. Any limitations on installation methods, and then also what was the installation intended for. So, you know, choosing the right tile and the proper installation materials depends on the following. You know, how was the installation, you know, how was the installation to be used? Are there any aspects of the overall project that which might limit the choices or, you know, the installation methods, like thickness of the tile, for example, or space limitations? The type of tile and stone will determine which material methods are most appropriate. So again, if you're setting glass or if you're setting natural stone, you could be limited to what type of installation materials you need due to the effects that the stone might have from the Portland cements or from different colors of grout, for example. I mean, I'm sure we've all been a part of projects where we've seen staining occur or wet spots occur that we couldn't get to disappear. So again, that comes down to using the correct installation products for that job. But the substrate is definitely one of the most critical factors. It must be sound, it must be clean, it must be suitable to receive a hard finish, and that occurs, you know, quite often actually on my side of the fence, where we have multiple jobs where the substrate was built and it was never actually built, you know, originally to withstand the tile installation, the weight of the tile installation. We actually just I was actually just a part of one. Comes to my head right away was we got invited to a project that the actual it was at a college. I'll leave the name out, but it was at a college, and this dormitory area that they were trying to tile, the wood substrate was actually built in 1888. It was the original material that was built in the building, and we had to take a lot of additional steps to be able to install the tile that they were looking to install. So substrate's going to play a big factor there. What is the intended purpose of the installation itself? Is it going to be up against any thermal or chemical exposure? Is it in a wet area, whether it's intermittent or continuous? Foot traffic and vehicular traffic, really big deal, especially when we're dealing with car dealerships now. A lot of these buildings are being built, and you know, we kind of go down a road of, oh well, there could be a car here or something like that, and it's difficult because it more than likely the same installation materials for just regular foot traffic, which is going to be kind of light to heavy residential or light to heavy commercial, is not going to be the same for vehicular traffic or steel wheel traffic. Malls are a big deal as well too. I've been a part of projects where we've actually went into mall scenarios, for example, and we consider that to just be a heavy foot traffic area. But indeed, whenever the malls are changing out the stores, the location fronts in those, they're actually bringing in steel-wheeled rollers on these. When they have to change out the lights, they're bringing in steel-wheel rollers, and that does cause an issue if you don't have the proper coverage and proper installation materials for the tile installation that was there. Again, what was its intended purpose? Was it going to go on a wall? Was it going to be on a floor, a countertop, a soffit? A big question is it interior or exterior? So knowing if the installation is interior or exterior is vitally important. You have the freeze thaw conditions, thermal expansion and contraction, traffic, and moisture can and will affect the tile installation as a whole. All types of applications are affected differently by a variety of stresses and movements. Vehicular and foot traffic putting different types of stresses on installation, and the tile and setting materials must be able to handle that load. So that's what we're talking about. Was the setting materials able to convert from foot traffic to a car dealership, or a car being driven in there? Wet areas, for example, they require special attention so that you can prevent any type of leakage or water damage. And a big thing for the thermal expansion is the exposure to sun and heat, and it's often overlooked in the application of tile and during the life of the installation. But use of tile in these areas exposed to chemicals and special types, or I'm sorry, and heat or sunlight, it is going to play a factor with how long the installation actually lasts. We have been in many scenarios where we're using an interior application, for example. We specify the materials as interior materials. And a lot of these can cross over. You can have interior and exterior. It's not to say that, companies like mine, for example, they're only in one spot. They can easily transition to different spots, but it is interesting whenever you think about, I'll use the car lot, or I'm sorry, excuse me, a car dealership, for example, or even a lot of office buildings now, they have these open fields where they like a lot of windows. And we're treating the interior applications, and we're going to get to movement joints here in a few slides, but we're treating these because they're interior and we feel that they're climate controlled. We're treating these, we're putting the movement joints like every 20 feet, for example, for tile installation to prevent tinting and cracking of the grout in the tile. And in reality, it's sitting next to, floor to ceiling windows that stretch an entire section of the building. And if you really think about it, if you walked up and felt the tiles versus the area that was shaded, you might notice a 10 to 15 degree difference. So, in areas with a lot of windows, for example, we need to almost treat that like an exterior application, and we need to understand even what direction the building is facing. That's going to be a big deal as well, as far as how much sunlight it's actually getting. The limitation on installation methods, right? So we have the substrate, the slope and wet areas. So the Tcna is going to call out for any slope and wet areas needs to be a 1/4 inch of fall per lineal foot. Dead and live load, that's a big deal for balconies scenarios that we've dealt with in the past. And design thickness, how tall can it actually be? The building, sometimes whenever we get in there with the tile installation or stone installation, the walls are already set, the doors are already there as well too, and then we find out that we're 1/4 inch too high, or 3/4 of an inch too high. I mean, it can really vary different scenarios, but it is a big deal. So thickness is an important consideration, right? So like I said, door heights, dead load allowance. How about ungauged or gauged tile and stone, right? So we got the ungauged, can have different thicknesses. That's a big deal when you're talking about slate installation, for example. Slope to evacuate water, if necessary. All these have to be taken into account. Your substrate, not all substrates are suitable for tile, and not all substrates are suitable in particular applications. So an example of that would be, wood substrates should never have tile directly adhered to them, especially in an interior, in particular in an exterior environment, right? So, and we have to talk to the installers, and we have to understand as designers and architects in that field that, what is the difference between your substrate and your underlayment, for example, and how that works. A common misconception that I've dealt with actually recently, and I've got a great partner in crime with me that works with me in Indiana, Michigan. And, I've always, in my past, always understood that you can do a direct bond application interior to wood. And really putting the study into that. And again, going back to the Tcna manual, you will find that you actually, that just because you have a 3/4 inch exterior grade plywood down on the substrate, it still needs a secondary layer. And that's not even for a natural stone installation where we commonly see that, but you need that secondary layer to actually act as the underlayment. So understanding substrate versus underlayment, and those terms are actually defined in the index of the Tcna manual. So again, we'll go back to that as often as possible when we're looking for definition of installation. What type of tile stone are you going to choose, right? We have different dimensions, we have different sizes, different thicknesses. Again, gauged and ungauged, which we previously discussed. Glazed and unglazed porcelain, big, big difference there. Glazed and unglazed block, big difference there on what types of grout could be used for that. Because cementatious grouts notoriously can stain these unglazed block, for example. Quarry, ceramic, porcelain, glass. So for example, quarry tile is an excellent choice for commercial installations, right? Ceramic is probably more commonly going to be used in your residential or light commercial applications. Porcelain is basically for any environment, right? That would also include a freeze-thaw environment if you're doing exterior. And then we have the glass tile that many designers are going to use for a design aspect. Glass and porcelain, glass and tile and porcelain tile require like far higher bonding capabilities, right? Compared to quarry tile or to ceramic tile. So that there's a big difference there as far as what we actually want to use. And again, that's going to fall back into the ANSI standards as, are we going to use a highly modified insulation material, or are we going to go with just the standard basic? So that's going to be a big deal there. So you have many different finishes, colors, textures that can be achieved by glazing tile, right? So glaze can also provide a slip resistance and some light chemical resistance as well. Glazed tile is easier to grout than unglazed, right? So we actually have a surface on top of it that would allow the grout to kind of glide around, be easily moved by the installer. There we can also achieve, I don't know if the slides are actually going to talk about it, but we also have a lot of sealers that can be used to actually seal the natural stone and seal the tile, or even use a grout release, for example, that would allow us to grout easier as well there too. So depending on the stone that you pick, we may need to consider that during the specification process. And that's going to come down to knowing the product itself and talking with the manufacturer again about what they want, how they want that installed. In most of the porcelain ceramic facilities, they're going to be open to have that conversation with you if you call, if the instructions are not already on the box. So most of the ceramic tile and gauge stone are uniform in thickness, right? The tile and stone of varying thicknesses require setting into a fresh thick bed mortar to achieve a uniform level surface. So, we have different types of installation methods. We have thin bed installations. Now it's referred to as not medium bed, but large and heavy tile installations like LHT installations. And then you also have some methods that are not commonly, they're not as commonly used anymore, but we have what we call a wet set method. So if you're using an ungauged porcelain, they may need to actually, an ungauged slate, for example. I like to go back to that because I've just had a recent project with that. But you'll actually set that into a wet mortar bed that's not compacted, and they'll actually do skim coats of mortar to the mortar bed itself and to the back of the stone. They'll lay that stone down and they'll beat it into place. And that's really unique because they may have to even be holding slope. So on, like I said, the recent job that I was dealing with, the slate installation still needed to hold a 1/4 inch of fall per linear foot because it was an exterior application that was going to get wet, and they were beating this into place. So, they had a sloped substrate, but because they're doing a wet set method, they had to continuously keep that slope through the installation, which is going to be a lot easier to achieve when you're talking about a sloped concrete substrate that we can just maybe put a waterproofing down or crack isolation down. And then you could actually keep the slope on a tile that's rectified, and it's not, it's a gauged porcelain, so it's all the same thickness, and it's just going to run fluidly with the actual concrete substrate itself. So 2 totally different types of installation there. Tile also comes in various sizes, right? So each size is unique to its own installation guidelines. Larger tiles require stronger and more flexible adhesives. That's what it comes down to. What is the framing and the substrate, right? Type. So you've got solid backing, so you have concrete floor, masonry wall, right? We also refer to that as the CMU. You have the metal framing for walls, and then you have wood framing for floors and walls. Interior wood frame floors must meet deflection ratings and have a suitable substrate properly attached to the floor. Exterior grade plywood and cement backerboard are the most popular choices for substrate in these applications, but we also obviously, that is, again, that is just standards that have always been set and that we feel comfortable with, that are changing, yearly, according to Tcna. There used to be guidelines for a minimum thickness, or a maximum thickness of the floor itself. And now those are changing as long as the floor itself meets deflection, because there are new types of wood that are coming into it, that are coming into play. Some joist spacing could be 16 on center, 19 on center, and then now we're seeing them as close as 12 on center, and sometimes we've actually seen it even closer, just depending on where the building is being built and what the ownership actually wants out of that building, and what we're going to install on top of it, how tall it's going. So uncoupling, for example, is getting very, very popular, and I believe it is talked about later in this slide. So interior and wood steel framed walls, they must meet deflection as well too, right? They have and have an acceptable substrate properly attached. So cement backerboard and gypsum drywall are widely used options in this field. Exterior wood and metal framed walls must be deflection, be waterproof, and have a vapor retarder present as well too. So that's a big deal there. We're seeing that on residential applications. You're seeing it used. There are different types of boards that are being put up now, and then most commonly they're using a vapor retarding plastic that's being put over top of it. But companies are out there that are producing or already have produced liquid applied membranes too that can act as a primary waterproofing, or they'll act as a secondary, and in that case, they're widely used as like what I would refer to it as a bulk water management system. So exterior rated cement backerboard and mortar over top of wire lath. That is another method that they can use as well for exterior wall applications. I see that trend maybe fading a little more, like I said, with the products that are coming out into the field, but it is still an acceptable method per the Tcna as well. And that would also, I believe that's also going to go into the concrete block and masonry division as well. Concrete floors must meet deflection and have no curing compounds or sealers present. If the concrete is cracked, an anti-fracture membrane is probably going to be recommended to prevent the damage to the tile or stone. So another big thing that we're seeing in the field, out in the field, is the fact that we want concrete to dry faster, and that is a tough subject for tile, specifically for tile and flooring companies, because we'll have a floor that's been laid maybe for just a couple of days, and hey, can we install tile on it? Well, we are going down a whole nother road now of, for interior applications, for example, you can actually use moisture mitigation products that would actually allow you to get on the product as quickly as just as fast as you could walk on it, basically. But like I said, we still have the exterior applications that are happening where moisture mitigation testing needs to be done, and that may need to be a part of the specification as well too. Exterior concrete walls, so that's the last part of this is they must be clean, they must be plumb and true, right? We can't set stone on walls that are wavy, and a lot of times we want them waterproof prior to the installation, and stone going over top of them, and that's just so that we don't allow any water to get back behind the installation, do any type of wicking that actually, for example, like if you're doing natural stone ledger on a stone wall, you don't want the water itself to actually come through and start wicking up and maybe even change the look of your natural stone. And we see that commonly whenever you look at a wall, you'll notice that's lighter, and then as you get to the bottom, maybe a couple feet, you'll notice a darker stone, or maybe a delaminated stone, because the hydrostatic pressure is actually pushing that off the wall. So many different scenarios there whenever you're talking about the masonry walls. Approved substrate guidelines. So we've got membranes, you've got the substrate preparation products, non-porous substrates, wood, gypsum, backer boards, concrete, for example. So concrete, new and existing on all grade levels, floor and wall. Backer board can be used, a lot of times we're going to see it on floors as well, but we're going to see it on walls. Usually they're fiber reinforced. We have the gypsum board, and that's going to be used as a flooring underlayment and for drywall. The wood needs to be an exterior grade plywood or a properly prepared OSB, and that's if it's an interior application only, again, not using a direct bond. So the non-porous substrates, so well bonded ceramic tile, prepared metals, terrazzo. So we can go over all these things. We get the question quite often on my side of the fence, like, hey, we've got metal to go over in an elevator. We have metal stair treads. We have terrazzo that we don't want to tear up because of the cost factor there. Can we go over top of it. We can. The installation materials now has come so far that we can actually get right on top of that. We may have to use different liquid applied membranes, but we can do that. So substrate preparation products, so self-leveling, underlayments, patch and primers. Okay, so that's something that the installation material companies are going to provide for you. The we can now, we used to have to use lath under during every self-leveling product. That's not the case anymore. We've got away from that. We do have minimum thicknesses there, but it can be achieved, and we can go directly over wood installation that way. Again, as long as the wood installation is meeting deflection ratings. So deflection, personally, I feel that, deflections, expansion joints, there are just a few core products that we're talking about here, or I'm sorry, a few core specifications that we're talking about here, where it is truly, I mean, if it's missed in the details, this could actually hinder the entire installation itself. We know that tile is not the cheapest option. We do understand that in the industry, but when you look at it over the lifetime versus something like an LVP, for example, or carpet, for example, number one, we go back to the fact that it's a green product. So we took it from the earth, we give it right back to the earth, which is beneficial in every category. But we also have to look at it and say, I've seen installations of tile. We go back to the Sistine Chapel, but let's just talk about something standard here in America. You can be looking at something saying, wow, that installation lasted 65 years, right? I mean, that I would say that's common. I've seen tile installations myself that have lasted 40, 45 years in residential applications. I have yet to see carpet that has lasted that long. I have yet to see LVP that has lasted this long. So yes, there is the upfront cost of these products themselves, but the behind the scenes factor is this is a lifetime, and if it's installed correctly, it's not going to come up until the ownership wants to make a change to retrofit or bring it to, here we are into 2022 now, right? Or coming up on 2022. So, and obviously we're not using the baby blue tile anymore, the pink tile. So membranes is the last part of this. You have waterproofing membranes. What else? You have crack isolation membranes, vapor retarding, and sound deadening as well. Excuse me. Incompatible for direct bond. So again, the things we do not want to bond to, right? Masonite. No, we're not going to go over any top of those type of products. Gluon. That is not a suitable substrate. It is not. It's not accepted. Most installers know this, but I have seen scenarios where they want to bring up the floor this 1/8 inch or this 1/4 of an inch, and they still think that the Luon is a proper source of wood substrate. It is not. So interior grade plywood, marine grade plywood, and fire rated plywood. So I'm going to kind of group those all together, but in particular, fire rated and marine grade, right? So these have chemicals that have been put in them, or layers that have been put on them as well, that don't allow fire to transfer through, and also don't allow water to transfer through. So although those are great products, we cannot do a direct bond to them because it will not allow our thin sets and setting materials to really get the proper grip on them as well. You can look at different epoxy products that might bond to that, but again, we're going to go back to manufacturer's recommendation if there's a manufacturer out there that will allow that process to happen. Interior grade plywood, not built the same as the exterior grade plywood, so you have the different layers in there, the different glues that are made to put these together. And I have seen residential applications that have used interior grade plywood over top of crawl spaces, for example, where the crawl space and the house themselves are not on the same they're not holding the same humidity. Excuse me. They're not holding the same humidity, and they're also not holding the same temperature, and that would cause the interior grade plywood to actually swell in that scenario and cause an issue with the installation itself. Oriented strand board, obviously, so the OSB. Again, we don't want to do a direct bond to that, and the concrete with curing compound and sealers. Again, when we use those curing compounds to get on top of it faster, or sealers to get on top of it faster, we do see issues with the actual bonds, bondability using normal thin set. So deflection requirements. So this is an interesting one. I'm going to try to kind of get through this one, and if we have questions at the end, we can go back and look at those. So deflection is the movement of the system when the load is added, right? So the excessive movement is not good for tile and stone installations. It can cause different types of cracking, delaminations. L/360 is the common term for ceramic tile deflection criteria. And that's where you're allowed 1 inch of movement over 30 feet. So it's a 360-inch span there. Okay, so they kind of break it down in inches. So to figure deflection, like for example, I'm not saying it's impossible, but let's say it's in a residential application and your room is 24 foot long. Okay, and we'll kind of use that for easy math there. So a 24-foot span, if you times that by 12, to break it into inches, you end up with 288 inches. 288 inches divided by 360, which is still the actual method that we use, the L over 360, right? So you're going to get 0.8 inches, and that floor can experience. So that's what that means, is that floor can experience 0.8 inches of movement over that 24-foot span. So no matter how big your room is, you can still break it down, divide by 360, and that is actually going to give you the amount of deflection based on that many inches of linear space there. So, and you can even break that down into the like how much space is allowed between the 16, like for example, 16 on center joists. You can actually break it down into how much movement is allowed between each of the joists as well. Stone installations, totally different though. Again, they have to be even more rigid, right? So they're going to allow 1 inch of movement over a 40-foot span. So same calculation that you would do there for the L over 360, but again, you have manufacturers that are going to, for stone is going to be the L over 480. And I can also say that, something that comes to mind right off the top of my head is that, many industry standards for stone are going to require the L over 720 as well too. So again, that's going to come down to the manufacturer's recommendations. If they have something that can, they can trump the industry recommendations for, but we would be looking at L over 360 or L over 720 for the standard for ceramic tile and stuff. Expansion joints required. This is a big deal. This is probably, I won't say the most common failure point, because there's obviously a lot of wet areas that can cause some issues as well too. But all buildings, all structures, and installations, they move. There is no exceptions. No matter how well you built this building or what your specifications are, there is movement that's happening. Wood frame structures, for example, and I can't quote this, but I have heard of how many thousands of gallons of water a new house build will lose in the first year that it's built, let alone the first 30 days. But I know I've heard it, up to like 5,000 gallons of water in a year. So it's just it's just a crazy amount of water that's moving. And when that happens, there is movement. Okay, there is expansion, contraction that's happening. Allowance must be made for movement to occur to prevent any damage from occurring. So it has to be done. We refer to EJ 171. It is definitely the John 3:16 of the tile industry. There's no doubt about that. There's an example of an exterior swimming pool in California that had it's actually the left side picture there, is that's actually in a Seal Beach, California. It had no movement joints incorporated into the structure, and the wrong adhesive was actually specified on this job as well too. The result is obvious and very expensive, right? So the tile tinted and it lost its bond. So the tiles had to be removed and replaced. Big ugly mess they had going on there. But essentially, because they were this application itself was hard grouted to the walls, right? So we have specifications in the Tcna that require, an 1/8 of an inch off of the studs of the wall or the drywall that's on the wall as well too, right? We don't butt tile up to the actual substrate itself. And then in doing so, with not adding expansion joints in this large area that was subject to thermal expansion, for example, the concrete, the tile itself not acting together, and tinting is where you'll actually see in that left picture there, where you actually have the tile that pops up. If you were interested, this is a little outside the presentation, but I would tell you to YouTube an example of tile tinting. You're going to probably get some different examples, but some of the most popular videos on YouTube for that are actually going to be where people are sitting in their homes, or for example, one in particular, they were actually in bed at night. The expansion joints were not put in properly, which caused the tinting to happen. And when tinting first starts occurring, when it's relieving its pressure, when the tiles come off the floor, I mean, these tiles are coming out at such a rapid pace that they're actually hitting the ceiling, and it's so loud it sounds like someone is firing a gun inside the home. and it's happening pop, 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 pop multiple times throughout the installation. And not only is it scary itself if you woke up to that, or maybe you're in the kitchen, but obviously we have family and we have friends, and we have the ownership groups that we're building these buildings for. This could actually turn deadly. I mean, if you've ever touched a sharp tile or a broken tile before, it is just as sharp as any knife you've ever touched, and could be a serious problem, and could at the end be a lawsuit, when it comes down to it, and not to mention just the failed installation in itself. But yeah, definitely check with the current version of the Tcna manual to check up on EJ 171 for the most current information, and movement joints, where they need to be implemented in the tile work, right? So if memory serves me correctly, I'd have to double check this, but I believe that the interior application is every 20 feet minimum is in each direction. There has to be a soft joint. So we would actually use, like, for example, we would use silicone in the on the tile side of things. It's probably the most commonly used product there. And then you also have the exterior application. I believe it's every 8 to 12 feet on exterior applications. So this is definitely going to play a big factor. There are also rules and, I should say regulations on if where it can be placed. And now we have different patterns, right? So, many years ago, it was tile next to tile, next to tile, next to tile. It was kind of a block pattern, and you didn't have to worry about it. But now we have these intricate designs, for example. And so EJ 171 also addresses if your soft joints need to change direction, and how much direction they can actually change according to the size of the tile. So you can follow the grout line itself. It doesn't necessarily have to be hard cut into the top of the installation the way it used to be. So surface preparation is key. Again, the substrate must be rigid, able to support the weight of the installation, structurally sound, clean. So, and when we say clean, we mean free of any dirt, any dust, oil, wax. What else do we out there? Grease. There's grease installations. If you're redoing the back of house kitchens and stuff. Paint. Again, concrete curing compounds, concrete sealers, and any other material that would act as a bond breaker. And and we see this all the time, especially residential sometimes as well, but really in commercial applications where the tile setters will actually be setting tile in rooms where they might be drywalling or spraying. And whenever you're talking about drywalling, you kind of think, well, how would that interact with the tile installation? But if you're sanding down those walls, that dust that's falling on the floor, if it's not being cleaned up properly and kind of mopped up there, we could just be setting tile to a layer of dust that's actually on the floor. And then we get the call from the ownership group that says, why is my tile delaminating from the floor? Those kind of things are kind of easy to point out, because I don't know any manufacturers currently right now that make one-sided thin set. It's kind of a little term that we like to use in the industry. If we have a great bond to the back of the tile, but not to the concrete substrate, there is some type of a bond breaker that's happening there. If we have a great bond to the concrete, for example, and not to the tile, well, then we also know there was a bond breaker on the back of the tile too, which can that can show up in many different forms, such as like a kiln release, or even I've seen where they'll set tile outside during the installation process, and you see rain and dust because they're doing work outside, and you're seeing dirt that's being thrown up as well. Dirt can act as a bond breaker if they're not cleaning and sponging off those tiles before the installation. Water itself can act as a bond breaker. They have a great video on the Tcna page that shows that it's actually on YouTube as well too, but where installers will sponge down the tile, which is a correct procedure, but by putting too much water in the installation itself and setting the tile too fast after that, it will as soon as you set the tile, you feel that you have a great bond, but you'll pick it up and there will be no thin set whatsoever stuck to the back of the tile. So could water be a bond breaker? Yes, it can, definitely. But going back to the substrate, the substrate must also be suitable for tile installation as well too, and in the environment that it's going to be located. So waterproofing membranes. So yeah, different options there, right? Obviously, it's used for wet and intermittent wet areas, load bearing to support the direct bond applications with polymer fortified mortars. You have liquid and sheet applied, and then you have single multi-component, right? So tile and stone itself may be considered waterproof or highly water resistant, but it does not provide waterproofing for the installation. So we have to, we're trying to protect the actual installation of the products itself and the substrates that it's being put to. Any interior wet area installations like tub surrounds, showers, countertops, and any exterior vertical applications on buildings should be waterproof. The waterproofing membrane helps keep the moisture from getting in the substrate, where it can cause what we were talking about, the wicking and the different types of damages like delamination. Properly installed waterproofing prevents water damage, and it can also prevent like mold and wood rots. Exterior installations over occupied space, for example, where decks require waterproofing systems, which they're probably going to incorporate even a primary roofing membrane. Okay, so that's another thing to think too. Whenever when we're talking about these balconies that are over top of another occupied space down below them, which is what we consider an interior application again, that not only is that a balcony, which is the way it was designed in our design aspect, but in reality that is a roof, right? It has different pitch that's required per the roofing I guess the ANSI standards for roofing or whatever, whatever they follow. I'm not familiar with the roofing instructions, but and it may require like I said, a primary roll roofing membrane, which those can be a peel and stick. They can be different types of adhesives to put on, but definitely get with your project engineer on that one to say, okay, how are we treating this and what are we doing here? Sometimes just using waterproofing in those scenarios is just not enough. So we have crack isolation membranes as well. This is obviously for preventing cracked tile and grout. You have liquid and sheet apply. I'm sorry, liquid or sheet membranes as well. There, it is designed to isolate tile from minor, in plane cracks. That's a big deal, right? In plane, right? And then we have it is designed for thin bed tile and actually LHT applications as well too, which is not listed there, but it is. We have different types of cracks, right? You kind of got to know what you're up against, but you have hairline shrinkage and spider web cracks. Any type of cracking can essentially telegraph through the tile and the stone installation. The use of the anti-fracture or the crack suppression membranes will help reduce the potential for these happening in plane cracks. We just don't want them telegraphing up. A lot of times we'll hear the term like, oh, I'm just going to put a Band-Aid on it to treat these existing cracks. That will not work. If you are talking about like a Band-Aid type of method, there are installation instructions according to different materials that say, okay, you can just treat a crack, for example. Your entire floor may not be crack isolation, which to me it's such a I don't know why it would ever get passed up, especially on a concrete, but even wood installation as well too. But I have seen scenarios where they'll actually only treat specific cracks. But when you do that, again, check with your manufacturer recommendations, because they may tell you that, and I've seen it done where installers will come in and they'll put a 6-inch band over top of a specific crack that's running all over the floor because there's no other spider cracking occurring. Okay, well, that's great. I still wouldn't agree with you. I would assume that even if that floor was 20 years old, it's still moving and it still has the potential to crack, right? We know concrete's going to do two things: get hard and it's going to crack. There's no doubt about that. But if you do these Band-Aid type methods, they may not be doing them correctly. A lot of times they're going to require you to actually use like 3 times the width of the tile whenever you treat these types of cracks. And if that's the scenario, per the manufacturer's instructions, I mean, think about it. Let's say you're in an office building where you're using a 24 by 24 inch tile. I mean, that means that Band-Aid that you're supposedly putting on the floor technically would need to be wider than 6 foot. Well, if you're going to do one crack or 2 or 3 cracks, chasing them at 6 foot wide, why would you not just do the entire floor, right? Whether it's liquid applied or whether it's actually a sheet membrane type of material. Again, most cases, what we're just trying to do is protect the finish of the tile and stone. Like we said, it's very expensive. We don't want to see it ruined by cracks that are coming up that we know are going to occur in the concrete. And then you have, like I said, so we should just be using the anti-fracture membranes in general. But it's not always a requirement depending on what the ownership is looking for there. So I think if there's anything else on this there. Yeah, I guess the other thing is that whenever you actually are going over top of the concrete, whether you're using the sheet membrane or liquid applied, for example, the other thing is it's also going to help the concrete itself become stronger. So those products can actually help prevent the concrete from cracking in the future. So again, it's just insurance for your tile installation project. The uncoupling membrane. So we've got the this is what I was talking about earlier. This is becoming more and more popular versus using the concrete board on the floors itself. So this is going to be used on a floor installation only, right? It limits the amount of stress on the tile system. And what it is it's a plastic membrane that's configured to provide airspace between tile and the substrate. So same situation as what we were talking about. These products usually have a sheathing on the back of them, like a fabric sheathing, in plane movement there, right? So, you know, I can't see my hands, but you've got the movement of left to right, right? It's actually, so if a crack would occur, essentially if the crack was smaller than an eighth of an inch, the sheet membrane itself would span the crack. But even if the sheet membrane, even if the crack was so big to where at that point you actually do have a structural issue, that's not a manufacturer's issue or an installation issue, that's a substrate issue. But let's say it grew to 1/4 of an inch. The essential idea behind it would be that the sheathing would actually break and the plastic would stay attached to the top of the I'm sorry, excuse me. Yeah, the sheathing would actually break and that the plastic would be able to kind of act as a floating floor there. All right. Selecting the correct adhesives, right? So are we needing a rapid set or a conventional type of mortar? Are we needing a cement based or epoxy? Do we need a modified or unmodified, depending on different types of installation you're doing and what types of products you're using? For example, do you need a thin, a medium, or a thick bed installation as well? So there are factors there. We now call the medium bed the LHT mortars, like I said, the large and heavy tile mortars. And there are different types of adhesives for all these options, right? The factors we previously discussed, you know, will decide what's best for us. And definitely working with your regional representatives or your national representatives with the material manufacturing companies, they can definitely get you on the on the right of way. A lot of them are going to have master specifications too for the different types of tile installations. The grout and sealant, right? I'm sorry, the grout and sealant. I like that it says that it's the critical final steps because it is so critical. And the reason why I kind of jumped from the bottom to the top is I like the way it's distributed there. The grout and sealant is responsible for a very high percentage of the complaints and claims. We'll talk about why here in a second. The cost is such a small fraction of the tile installation now, right? So tiles are getting bigger, grout joints are getting smaller, and that's because of the issues we've had before as far as, being dirty. But like I said, I'll kind of get to that in a second. It is the only visible component of the installation. So it's funny how sometimes we will actually hear of complaints in the industry saying, wow, that grout looks horrible, that grout looks bad. But in reality, they may not even realize that underneath of the actual installation itself, they have voids. They don't have the proper coverage for an interior dry scenario, which is 80%. What about 95% on an exterior application, right? They require that type of coverage. They prefer 100%, but I think 95% is now the new standard there, just because of how hard 100% is to achieve. But again, nobody's going to realize that part of it, but they're going to see that their grout was not the perfect color, or that there maybe might be some cracking in the grout, or the sealant the sealant, because it has a slick surface, does not match the color matching that they want out of the grout, and that's tough. So honestly, grout is probably the most important component of the installation to the end user, not to us, but to the end user, because it's the only part that they can actually see. So, extra care in determining what the end user's expectations are, right? And then obviously specifying the appropriate specification to ensure a satisfied customer. The grout may also be the least expensive material, but for whatever reason, it's always compromised at the end, and then we see this happen. And a lot of times, if it's happening from the installation side, it's just because of the ease of use, right? Most installers want to use like a sanded or an unsanded grout, even though these kind of, those grouts are slowly but surely going away. Regular sanded, unsanded, I mean, not the improved versions, but because they think it's just easier to install. But when you look at regular sanded grout that has a porosity rating of 10 to 15% versus a type of epoxy grout that might be 0.5% or less, you're really giving the customer exactly what they're asking for whenever you're talking about something that's durable, something that's nice and hard, that's not going to wipe away, something that stays clean longer, right? And again, nothing is self-cleaning, but it just depends on the cleaning regimens and how they're cleaning them, if they're cleaning them properly. Basic cement grout is the industry standard of the installers. But again, that's only because it's easy to install, and they don't have high levels of performance. I mean, the color consistency and ease of maintenance and things like that, it's all questionable because of how they're actually installing themselves. The sealant plays an important factor by helping to allow like the movement and maintaining of the waterproof integrity if that was necessary, while still remaining aesthetically pleasing. Sealants must be specified in all corners, coves, and change of planes. I don't really know if like I said, and when I talk about sealants, I am talking about the actual the 100% silicones, for example. I'm not talking about the unsanded and sanded caulks. Those are not to be installed in any corners, coves, or change of plane, and that's where we use sealants at. So it is interesting how the industry is changing, and people are understanding that sanded and unsanded caulks really don't have a place in the specifications anymore. Okay. Failure to put these, to put silicone in the actual corners, coves, and change of planes, that's going to result in cracked grout and possibly cracked or delaminated tiles as well too.
Curtis, we have a couple questions here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I did not see that.
This is from John. John would like to know, would you add membrane over expansion joints in concrete floors in a house? And John, if you'd like to elaborate any on that, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, well, I did have a house. It was a new construction. And when they built it, they had, this expansion joint in the slab.
Mm-hmm.
And the tile kept cracking after they installed the tile.
Yes.
I had them come back, replace the broken tile, but the tile, it was reoccurring. But I think, they didn't put down a membrane, or they didn't even put either a rolled out membrane or a liquid membrane.
Okay, gotcha.
Over that expansion joint. So
sure, and yeah, they definitely would have wanted to. So what the easiest way to answer this here, and John, you may not know the answer to this, but was it actually considered like a control joint, or was it just an expansion joint, or do you know what the difference?
It was a control joint.
Okay, so it was a control joint. So if it was a control joint, then yes, the Tcna manual is going to call out specific instructions for that. It does have to be honored through the installation, but sometimes we can actually put a soft joint, for example. It can go like, for example, one tile to the left or one tile to the right. So it doesn't, so again, with different patterns and things, it wasn't that long ago when we actually had to create a grout joint that was right over top of that control joint or the expansion joint, for example. And now we can actually go around that by filling in the control joints, putting a membrane over top of them that can be sheet or liquid applied, and then honoring it through the installation. So yes, we would honor it through the installation, but the Tcna is going to have specific instructions for where that has to go.
Yeah, I'm not in the house anymore, but if I was in control of it, I would have put a membrane down of some kind.
I do, yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, and then John had another question about why contractors do not use grout with sealer.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
I know they do it to save money, but then you have to.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm good. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, but then you have to come back and hire somebody to come in and seal all the grout.
Sure. And that's a great question, John. I will say this, and I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to address this. That is a huge deal. Number one, they do produce the grouts now with sealers already built into them. I would definitely recommend that is what we consider the premium or the highly modified. The grouts that are now maturing past the regular sanded and unsanded. So we're happy that those are out in the field. My company makes one as well too. Actually, I make a few as well. But I will say this too, depending on, you still have to look at what the manufacturer's recommendations are for does it need to be sealed in the future as well. So just because it says does not require sealer doesn't mean that it can't be sealed. right? So you have a kind of a play on words there where you can look at it and say, okay, and most sealers are dissipating sealers, right? So over time, even if you said, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and install this, you may still want to have a tile company or a maintenance plan, whether it's for your own home or for a project you're working on, that you would actually say, you know what, I want them to come back in 2 years and do a nice clean on it and then reapply the sealer. That's going to, again, ensure the integrity of the actual tile, I'm sorry, the grout itself, but it's going to keep it clean, because a lot of times, even with sealers that are built into grouts, for example, which I agree, John, they should be using those now, especially, you know, as technology changes, we adapt to that as well. But the real question becomes, you know, are they cleaning the floor properly? Or if it's your home, are you cleaning the floor properly? Because there's a meniscus, right? Whenever you look at grout, right? I mean, we want grout to be as flush as we can with the tile, but when they wipe it with a sponge, which is inevitable, they have to do that. It's called dressing the joints. It creates a meniscus there. And if you're just mopping over the floor, what actually is you're doing is you're cleaning the tile, but in reality, the grout joint itself is not being cleaned, and the dirty water is now sitting on top of that meniscus and is just basically entering the grout at a very, very slow rate when it has a sealer put onto it. So, you know, I tell people all the time, hey, you know, we need to have specific cleaning instructions for grout, for example, that would require a bristle brush that would actually go over top of the joint itself. And that bristle brush actually agitates the surface of the grout, and then we come back over top with a dry towel and actually wipe down these joints. It's not something that, you know, a lot of people say, well, I didn't expect all that, but in a tile installation, this is what we need to do. And if it's a wet area, for example, it needs to be properly sloped, because that will allow the water to actually run down the grout joint and get into the drain itself. But I do agree with you, John. Yes, it does need to. If they're offering, if manufacturers are offering a grout that has a sealer in it, why would you not? You know, and there's no real reason except for a price difference. But again, it's paying for itself, because you're going to pay the installer to come and apply the sealer as well too.
Yeah, what are you recommending to clean the floor? Like
So,
just plain water, or water with vinegar, or?
No, don't recommend vinegar actually at all. I know that is sometimes that can happen. They will actually, you know, I know people that have stated that in the past. I'm not saying that vinegar just actually kind of like an agitator for it. I'm a big fan of just neutral pH cleaners, right? It'll actually say that on the bottles. So don't use Windex, not using bleach, not using vinegar, that kind of thing. But yeah, a neutral pH cleaner, something that's not non-acidic. And ultimately it takes versus the actual chemicals themselves. I'm going to say at your local, you know, at your local home store, you can actually get a white bristle brush, right? There's white and black. There's different, just like sponges, their colors determine how coarse they are. And ultimately, you know, a white bristle brush is kind of the lighter version of the bristle brushes. But if you needed to, I would go to the black bristle brush, and actually, like I said, a neutral pH cleaner, or even water at that point, because what you're doing is you're kind of just agitating these little pinholes where the grout gets dirty, because dirt's actually sticking to the grout itself. So yes, it's just a bristle brush and a neutral pH cleaner.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Curtis.
Is there anything else, or do we want to keep? I can't see. I can see the chat, but I can't see in the chat. So.
Couple more questions.
Sure.
Let's see. Can you repeat the number of gallons of water lost from a new house the first year?
Yeah. So, and I'll say this. I don't really want to be quoted on that, but I want to say it was something like it was either 1,000 gallons over 5 years, or 5,000 gallons in the first year. But it is. If you talk to a home builder, I think they would probably be maybe even a little more prepared to answer that question. I'd like to think so, at least. But it is hundreds of gallons, if not thousands of gallons of water in the first 1 to 5 years of the process itself. Yes. I'm sorry, I can't be very definitive there. It's not a actual tile process. It's more of a home builder process, but I've just heard that in passing.
Okay, I think that's all our questions for now. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So again, this, you know, what we were just talking about, the maintenance requirements, right? So tile itself is not self-cleaning, and it does require maintenance, right? Proper cleaning techniques are very important to the long-term success of any tile installation. For instance, acids that we were just talking about, they're not recommended for Portland cement products. Generally, we just want to use neutral pH cleaners. That's that's sufficient for everyday use. Okay, I mean that, and it's not harmful to us or the environment itself. Portland cement grout, for example, so those sanded grouts we were talking about, some tile and some stone can be stained by use of variety of materials. So sticking to one that you want to use, not switching back and forth, that's going to be a big deal. Choosing the proper product for the installation environment, and specifying the highly stain resistant grouts that we were just talking about, right? So if you're going to go with a cementatious or a Portland cement product, go ahead. If it has a sealer built into it, that should be the new standard there. Okay, that right there is going to give you as much as you could possibly get, and on that side of the fence. But I am a big fan of telling people, if you want the highly, if you want the highly modified products, if you want those products with a lot of the latex content in them, or even the epoxy content, move into those product categories. You have, for example, we have epoxies. We have a lot of one-step grouts that are out there that are new chemicals. Okay, and then you also have things like urethanes. Urethanes are also another great product for hardness and what they're able to do. But there is different curing processes that happen with urethanes, like versus epoxy. So kind of knowing like how fast you want to be in the project as well too, right? And I can't be quoted on this, but I want to say that there might be some out there that are maybe rapid curing urethanes, but an epoxy job 24 hours later, I mean that job is going to be rock hard, and the installation behind it, at 28 days cure is going to be at like 3,500 psi. So highly stain resistant, and it's going to get very, very hard as well. And again, there's the sealant as well too. So the silicone we're talking about, it needs to be checked on a regular basis for wear and decomposition due to chemical cleaners. So if you see that being an issue, they needs to be cut out and it needs to be reapplied. So tile is a great choice to use as a finished, material. If done correctly, it provides years of service, right? It is sustainable. It does not contribute negatively to bad indoor air quality, right? So that's a big factor there, especially if you have children or maybe family members with breathing issues, which again correlates in everything we're dealing with right now in America. Consider the 4 points prior to the installation to make sure that your installation is successful, right? So what is your substrate? What is your tile type? Is it, what is the application area? Is it wet? Is it dry? Is it interior versus exterior? Does it need to be chemical resistant? Is it a back of house kitchen, for example? When we talk about grouts, a lot of specifications I've come across talk about epoxy grouts being used in the back of the house kitchen. But did you know that there is an industrial version of epoxy grouts that is going to stand up against the no rinse enzymatic cleaners? These are all factors that, knowing your rep and having your rep come into your office is as much as I've been on the other side, and it's not always the ideal time for a sales rep to come in, but if they have new products that they want to teach you about, and if they want to talk to you about your specific job, or you want to talk to them, have them come in, have that personal conversation with them outside of a CEU that says, hey, this is what I'm doing. What do you think about this? And it doesn't have to be that you take their word as gospel, but catching an outside representative, whether it's for the drywall or whether it's for the tile installation or the carpet or whatever, is your product suitable for what I want to do? And those are questions that still need to be asked every day. And that is the end of the presentation. I'm going to go through a couple slides here. So obviously, as a new requirement, we're provided to encourage members to complete the online, the CES discovery evaluation. That can be sent to you as well from me. So if you have any questions about that, getting with me and Grajna, we can definitely get that evaluation sent over to you. We always appreciate that. And thank you for your time today. That's the end of my presentation. It's completed now. If you'd like to take a quick moment to talk about, anything that you need to talk about, projects or questions, or qualified labor is a big deal right now. We're seeing that happen daily, and that's kind of why this slide's up there, because tile is a permanent finish. The lowest bid should not always be the driving factor, but whether who is the most qualified to perform the scope of work. So we have many programs out there. The ACT, which is the Advanced Certification for Tile Installers, the CTEF, which is the Ceramic Tile Education Foundation, right? The Certified Tile Installation Program. That is a huge deal. You can ask your installers for their certifications in this, but there are also other journeymen through the union, the American Stone Institute. They offer classes as well too. The Tcna is the same thing. all these things will equate to, you know, a higher quality labor, if you want to call it that. So.
All right, thanks, Curtis. Anyone would like to stay on? We also have a little bit of information about Realstone systems and our products. So I'm going to change the presentation screen here shortly. Okay. Bear with me just a moment here. Okay, so we are Realstone Systems. We are a natural stone veneer company. We offer a large number of products, including natural stone, which does work with the Laticrete and this system that Curtis talked about. I'm just briefly going to go through some of the products that we offer. We have our collection of natural stone, which is a panelized stone system. We have the highest tolerances in the industry. We do like to group products and present them in color families. You can see we have a huge collection of white and neutral tones. And I apologize, I am not able to switch the slideshow, which would be a much better experience. I will just go from here really quick. We also have a large collection of cream and warm tone products in a variety of profiles, ranging from smooth tiles to ledge stone panels, again, in a large variety of color tones. We have gray and black tone products, all the way from a pale pewter blue to deep black tiles. And we have a small collection of earth tone products as well. All of these products can be installed with the Emphys system, which is available through Realstone Systems. We are a stocking distributor of those products. And I'll just wrap that up here. For more information about Realstone or Laticrete and this products, please do reach out to us. We will be